Tonight, we delve into the legendary story of Irene, the forgotten son of Hissus, a demigod not born among the Olympians but forged in fire and steel within the mortal forge of a humble blacksmith. His daunting mission? To steal the eternal flame from Mount Olympus itself and rekindle the dying hearths of humanity. Yet, this was no ordinary quest. Standing in his path were a trio of formidable forces: a terrifying three-headed guardian from the underworld, a jealous god who darted around in winged sandals, and an oracle capable of summoning storms who foresaw just one inevitable fate for Arian: death. Before we immerse ourselves in this epic, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're the kind of person who loves when myth and mystery collide. Also, tell us where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Sometimes, stories like these serve as a better lullaby than sleep. Other times, they simply make your dreams roar louder. So now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for some soothing background noise, and let's journey together into tonight's tale. In the flickering blaze of Maini's forge, a place where men shaped iron through sheer sweat and heartfelt prayer, lived a woman whose skill rivaled that of the gods themselves. Her name was Callista, a mortal blacksmith with fire burning inside her soul, and a hammer that seemed to sing every time it struck bronze. She crafted swords capable of splitting spears mid-flight and armor so flawless that it was whispered even Ares himself had worn her breastplates into battle. The gods took notice, yet only one descended, not drawn by her beauty, for Callista was no lady of perfumes or palace gowns. She wore soot as her war paint, and carried the scent of iron mingled with pine smoke. But to Hissus, the lame god of the forge, the outcast of Olympus, there was something divine in her movements, a haunting familiarity that stirred something deep within him. One night, beneath a moon hanging low and blood-red over Aegean, Hissus entered her workshop silently, cloaked in smoke and shadow. He brought no gifts, no edicts from Olympus, only his presence. That night, the forge blazed brighter than ever, and 9 months later, a child named Arian was born. He did not cry at birth. Instead, his eyes opened glowing like embers, and the fire in the forge seemed to leap up in recognition of its kinship. Midwives gasped in awe. One whispered, "He's touched by the divine." Another crossed herself nervously, while the eldest muttered, "He won't stay in this world for long." Arian grew at a pace unlike any other child. By 5, he could shape iron like a seasoned smith. By 7, he forged his first blade, flawless, razor-sharp, and oddly warm to the touch. He never played with other children, nor did he tell lies. There was a calm, eerie stillness within him that unsettled the villagers. Fearful of what they didn't understand, the villagers branded him cursed, a son of a god without a throne. Children avoided him, and priests refused to bless him. But Callista's love remained fierce and unwavering. She taught him not only how to wield fire, but how to respect its spirit. "Flame obeys those who listen," she'd remind him, "not those who try to command it." By the time Arian reached 16, the forge of Irian burned day and night, shaping weapons for distant cities he'd never seen and kings had never made. Yet, beneath the molten metal flowing through his hands, there stirred a restless power within him. He wasn't born to simply live among mortals. His destiny was something far greater. Irian was destined to change the course of the world. Long ago, the eternal flame had been a gift stolen from the heavens itself. A divine fire wrested into existence by Prometheus. This was no ordinary fire. It was the fire of thought, of art, of creation. It was the spark that set humanity apart from the beasts. But over time, that age of defiance faded into memory. Humanity forgot the debt it owed the gods, and the gods in turn turned their backs on mankind. It began with subtle signs. Hearth fires once reliably glowing, now flickered and died out. Forests grew cold and unwelcoming. Storms stretched on endlessly. Crops withered even in spring's hopeful light. Homes were filled with the chill of frost, even in the height of summer. Children shivered beside unlit chimneys, their small faces pinched with cold. Elderly women whispered prayers into ashes that offered no warmth. Priests spoke in hushed tones of divine punishment. Scholars sought answers in the movement of stars. But across villages, towns, and sprawling empires, a deeper, more haunting fear took root. It was not that the world was ending, but that the gods had abandoned humanity. And in this fear, there was an unsettling truth. At the summit of Mount Olympus, the gods had locked away the last true flame, preserving it only in the divine brazier. For centuries, none dared touch it. They feared renewed rebellion, dreaded the legacy Prometheus had ignited. Their resolve was cold and harsh. Let them suffer, they decided, until they remember their place. Yet, not all gods shared this cruelty. In hidden corners of the world, whispers began to stir. The dryads spoke solemnly of a boy born of flame. Nymphs caught sparks dancing in the eyes of a boy from Myene. The winds carried a name, Irion, through forests and valleys. Deep within the chilled chambers of Delhi, the oracle dreamed of fire. The fire walking upright on two legs, lighting cities with its very steps. In crumbling temples, long forgotten, candles sputtered back to life at the rhythmic ringing of a blacksmith's hammer. Iran, the blacksmith, was unaware of the divine drama unfolding. All he knew was that the iron on his anvil was growing ever harder to shape. The flames in his forge demanded more and more breath, and the warmth that once came so easily was slipping steadily away. But the world had begun to watch. Gods, both ancient and silent, had turned their gaze toward Myene. Atop Olympus, the divine brazier, shielded by layers of marble and guarded by fate itself, flickered for the first time in generations, not responding to a god's hand, but to a boy born of fire and sorrow. And deep within Irion, something ancient and powerful began to glow. Meanwhile, Delhi, once the heart of the divine council, where kings and warriors ascended stone paths to hear Apollo's voice, was dying. Its columns cracked and were overrun with ivy, the sacred springs reduced to mere mist. Yet one voice remained, faint, buried deep within the mountain's breath. Irion arrived silently. No welcoming party awaited him at the gates. The torches that once lit the temple had long extinguished. Ivy clung to broken altars like desperate fingers, unwilling to let go of the fading faith. Thunder rumbled ominously above, not heralding rain but something far older, watching, waiting. Descending into the hollow chamber where countless generations had once begged and wept, he found her, the oracle, seated atop a crumbling stone throne, draped in violet robes, her skin pale as ash, her eyes blind but blazing with a mysterious fire. Arion sensed the brewing storm, tension thick in the air before he could even utter a word. Suddenly she drew in a sharp breath, akin to a flame being swiftly pulled back into its lantern. "Ion," she hissed, though the name remained unspoken until then. He remained silent. "You will climb the mountain. You will take the flame, and you will die." Her words cracked through the quiet like a whip, relentless and clear. Arion stood unmoved. He had heard tales of oracles, cryptic riddles woven in poetry and shadows. But this was no veiled prophecy. This was a verdict. Slowly she rose, her movements fluid and ethereal, like smoke dancing on the wind. "The gods will oppose you. The world itself will demand your failure. That flame you seek, it does not belong to mortals. It was stolen once before, and the price was eternal chains." Irion stepped forward, fists clenched with resolve. "Then let me pay that price." Silence hung heavy for a long moment. Then came laughter. Not cruel, but weary, the sound of one who had witnessed too many stories end in the same tragic way. "You already are," she whispered. Darkness swelled around them. Thunder roared to a deafening crescendo beyond the walls. The air thrummed with an ancient, primal energy. And then, in an instant, all fell utterly still. The oracle slumped back into her seat. Her mouth opened, but only smoke escaped. Her prophecy was complete. Aryan left without another word, yet her vision clung to him. Haunting dreams, flickering flames, even the shadows cast from his forge. The gods had spoken. His path was sealed. Yet, even Olympus could not foresee what a dying world would do when fire was returned to it. To ascend Olympus, to gain its favor, one must first earn the mountain's recognition. Olympus bows to none untested. Legends whispered that beneath the mountain's base lay not earth or stone but soul. Under its roots was a gate closed by silence, guarded by the oldest terror in existence, Cerberus, Hades, three-headed hound. No soul could pass that gate without touching death itself. Aryan did not question these tales. He had studied myths with the same care and caution that a blacksmith studies the temper of a blade. He knew well what awaited beneath Olympus's foundation. Yet to claim the eternal flame, he would have to descend, literally enter the underworld. So he prepared, not with armor, but with skill and craft. For 3 days and nights he toiled, forging a collar, not a weapon, but a tool of submission, from obsidian, iron, and the final ember from his mother's forge. Into the collar he carved 3 names, one for each of Cerberus's heads, and whispered them as he worked. Memory, loyalty, grief. On the 4th day, Aryan stood at the shadowed entrance of a cave, set to stretch downward forever. The wind that greeted him was icy, not stinging skin, but scraping the soul itself. The air smelled not of decay, but of prayers long forgotten. Deeper and deeper he moved forward. Bones faintly glowed in the dark. Torches that burned without a flame lit his path. Then he heard it, the slow, immense breathing of Cerberus, layered and rhythmic, like 3 storms dreaming in perfect unison. Aryan stepped into the clearing and found the great beast resting on a bed of ash and bone. Each of its 3 heads twitched to a unique rhythm. Its fur shimmered darkly in the faint light, and the air grew thick with the weight of an ancient test about to begin. The darkness surrounding the creature was deeper than mere absence of light. Its eyes remained shut, yet its ears twitched with awareness. Aryan made no move to draw a weapon. Instead, he approached cautiously, knelt down, and extended the collar toward the beast. Softly, he began to hum a familiar tune, the very song his mother had sung to him in his childhood, the melody she used to soothe his fears when night turned a world vast and merciless. Slowly, the creature's middle head stirred, the left head opened one glowing amber eye, and the right head snarled briefly before falling silent. They listened intently in the stillness. Seizing the moment, Aryan slipped the collar onto its neck. Cerberus exhaled deeply, and the massive door behind it opened, not with fury, but with respectful acceptance. Aryan had met death itself, and death had stepped aside. The climb toward Olympus was deceptive, for there was no true path. No markers or guiding stars illuminated the way. Only barren sheer rock, biting winds, and unplaceable whispers carried around him. Aryan climbed driven not by certainty, but by sheer instinct. His mortal hands scraped and bled, while his divine blood seared within. The mountain fought against every step he took. Suddenly he appeared, not with a thunderous roar, or a flash of godly light, but in absolute silence. Hermes, the eternal trickster, messenger, and thief, stood upon a ledge ahead. He was dressed as a traveler, his cloak loosely wrapped, sandals decorated with feathers, and his eyes sharp and piercing like shattered glass. A crooked, knowing grin played on his lips. "Well," Hermes said, flicking a coin between his fingers, "I thought you'd be taller." Aryan didn't pause in his ascent. Hermes continued, strolling beside him with effortless grace, never truly lifting a foot from the rocky surface. "I know why you're here. You want to return fire to mortals? Sweet, noble, and foolish?" Aryan finally stopped and answered. "Then stop me." Hermes laughed softly. "Stop you? No, Chaim Yani. I'm not here to battle you. I'm here to make sure you understand the weight of this bargain. You're venturing into the heart of Olympus, into the vault of the gods, into a story that was never yours to rewrite. Yet, Arian replied firmly, "Here I am." Hermes' grin faded just a fraction. "You're attempting to restore a balance that was broken for a reason. The flame was once a gift, a mistake, and now the gods guard it fiercely like a dragon guards its treasure. Not because it's valuable, but because it's deadly." Arian met his stare, contemplating those words. For a fleeting moment, Hermes' expression darkened. The very air around them shifted. The coin vanished from his grasp. His wings twitched impatiently. "You think you're Prometheus," he said coldly, "but you're barely a flicker compared to him." "I'm not trying to be him," Arian answered steadily. "I'm only trying to finish what he began." Without warning, Hermes stepped forward and pressed 2 fingers to Arian's chest. A surge of pain erupted. Not physical, but something deeper. An invisible thread inside him twisted and tightened. "The fire you seek," Hermes whispered, "will burn everything you are." Then he vanished. The mountain groaned as distant thunder rumbled. A storm was upon them. Not one of rain or wind, but a tempest of consequence. Undeterred, Arian continued climbing higher, muttering curses under his breath, yet never faltering. The curse settled into Arian's chest like frost gathering in the lungs. Initially subtle, a tightening during breaths, a dull heat simmering beneath the skin. But the higher he climbed, the more it gnawed at him, not as a wound, but like an expanding shadow woven deep into his flesh. Piece by piece, the man was being eroded, stripped down until only something raw and primal remained. Mount Olympus was transforming. It was no longer just a colossal mountain. It had become a living entity. Its cliffs shifted and trembled beneath his feet, while the wind howled through ravines like ancient spirits, furious at being disturbed. The higher he ascended, the more the world shed its mortal veil. Trees ceased to grow, birds fell silent, and even the stars above seemed to recoil. No clear paths lay ahead, only jagged ledges and sheer rock faces demanding sacrifice with every step. Irion's body was battered. He bled and slipped dangerously close to plunging to his death. Yet, just when it seemed all was lost, a sudden surge of heat flared within his chest, steadying him. It was as though the flame Hermes had warned about, the one destined to consume him, was awakening inside him. Despite his faltering strength, he pressed onward, driven by thoughts of dying hearths and freezing villages, of children shivering in the darkness. He remembered his mother, her blistered hands tirelessly crafting warmth for a world that was fast forgetting what warmth truly meant. But Olympus showed no mercy. Dark storm clouds gathered overhead, lightning crackling along ridges like irate gods pacing anxiously. Their watchful eyes bore down on him, judging, waiting for even the slightest misstep. Yet the mountain itself, the very essence of Olympus, resisted him fiercely. As he climbed, Irion passed ancient ruins sculpted into the stone, temples abandoned by faith, their altars shattered, their gods forgotten. Statues of Athena with hollowed eyes and cracked pillars once sacred to Zeus bore witness to the relentless march of time and silence. It struck Irion with a chilling realization, something nobody else dared speak aloud. The gods were no longer all-powerful. Their fear was palpable. They trembled at the thought of a mortal rekindling the sacred fire without their approval, a soul unbegotten in their divine halls daring to bear the light that once defined Olympus. In their dread, they unleashed their fiercest trials, ice, thunder, haunting visions and whispered voices. Yet he climbed, his hands torn, his heart smoldering. He rose above the clouds and, in the distance, illuminated not by sunlight, but by a divine flame, he saw it, the brazier burning, waiting. What he found at Olympus's summit defied expectation. There were no gleaming marble palaces, no golden gods standing guard. No triumphant trumpets or thunderous welcomes greeted him. There was only profound silence and the eternal flame. It stood solitary, centered within a windless clearing atop a pedestal of blackened stone, ancient beyond language, crafted by hands long forgotten. Inside, the flame danced, not with red or orange hues, but pure white, brilliant, blinding, alive. It did not flicker. It seemed to watch. Ariane stepped forward, feeling no burning pain from its heat. Instead, its warmth seeped into him, as though recognizing something lost for ages. His breath caught, his skin tingling. The ember Hermes had cursed into his heart, pulsed like a second heartbeat, calling out to the flame like a long-lost sibling. He reached out, and as his fingers neared the blaze, time itself seemed to falter. Visions unfolded before him. Cities built from firelight, his mother's forge blazing defiantly in the depths of winter, civilizations rising and falling, all sustained by fire, all gradually forgetting why the flame was vital. He also saw Prometheus's punishment was relentless. Chained to a rock, his liver torn apart daily by a vulture. The gods called it justice, but Arion saw through it, a crown worn by fear itself. He stood at a crossroads. He could turn away, let humanity endure the cold on its own terms, abandon fire, abandon himself. Yet, then he heard a whisper on the wind, the name Callista. In that instant he remembered who he was. Grasping the flame, it enveloped him entirely. Pain unlike any burn seared through him. It was as if his very essence was being rewritten. His bones cracked and reshaped, his skin glowed, veins pulsing with light. Dropping to his knees, he roared silently as the flame consumed every fiber of his being. The boy within him vanished, replaced by the fire-bearer. He was no longer holding the flame. He had become the flame itself. The brazier flickered, dimmed, and then went cold. The eternal flame was no longer chained to Olympus. It had chosen a new host. Arion collapsed beside the empty pedestal. Wisps of smoke rose from his fingertips, and his eyes shone with the light of dawn. Each shallow breath sent forth a faint warmth, carried by the wind down from the mountain towards the world below. He had claimed the fire not for himself, but for all mankind. Arion did not descend from Olympus. He carried the fire within him. The moment the flame entered his body, the mountain ceased its resistance. The winds fell silent, the sky cleared, and even the stone under his feet shifted, not in awe, but in recognition. He was no longer an intruder. He was a beacon. His body radiated divine heat, not scorching, but life-giving. Wherever he stepped, frost melted, and with every breath, the harsh winds softened. The air no longer smelled of smoke, but of renewal and rebirth. Yet he was incomplete. His limbs shook under the burden he bore. The eternal flame was more than just fire. It was memory. He felt every spark it had ever kindled. The first campfire burning in ancient caves. The torches lighting Athens. The forges building Troy. He sensed the weight of all it had caused. Cities set ablaze, temples razed, wars waged through stolen fire and ambition. The god's gift had never been pure, but this time, Arion vowed not to let it become a weapon. He descended through clouds and silence, passing shattered idols of gods long forgotten, their divine decay evident. He walked past the cave that once housed Cerberus, but the monstrous guardian was gone, as if death itself made way for what Arion had become. Reaching the world below, he found himself in a frozen village, where hearths sat cold and lifeless. The people gathered around, not fearful, but awestruck. Arion remained silent. He extended his hand, and a flame leapt from his fingertips into the nearest hearth. It caught and roared to life, then another hearth, and another. A chorus of fire spread, home to home, city to city, across lands that had long forgotten the joy of gathering around a fire freely, without prayer or fear. Arion burned. His hair shimmered like molten gold, his skin cracked with heat, and the dawn of a new age began to blaze within him. Irian's final moments resembled cooled obsidian, solid, unyielding, transformed rather than fading away. He was not merely extinguishing. He had become the very flame itself. Wherever that fire blazed, the world seemed to murmur his name, not in reverence, but in heartfelt gratitude. No tomb was ever erected to honor Irian. No statues stood in his image. Temples never echoed with songs sung for him. There were no grand processions, no mournful farewells, no climactic battles to signify his departure. Yet, despite the lack of ceremony, he never truly vanished. After the fires rekindled across the lands, peculiar events started to unfold. In remote villages untouched by any traveler, hearts ignited sporadically on their own. Forests once paralyzed by frost burst into bloom overnight. Blacksmiths wore their forges heated with newfound speed. Cold children whispered tales to their parents of a radiant man, standing beside the flames just before they roared alive. No proof existed, but all told the same story. Irian walked on until nothing of him remained to carry on. His body had long since cracked and burned, not out of weakness, but as part of a profound transformation. What lingered of Irian, his bones, blood, voice, had transmuted into spark, smoke, and heat, which he dispersed generously. The last place, touched by his essence, was his mother's forge, old and forgotten, its fires cold for decades, until one night a traveler, passing through, swore he saw a boy hammering a glowing white object upon the anvil. When the traveler looked again, the forge was empty, but the flames danced high and vibrant, just as they had in days of old. It is said the gods sensed this shift. Olympus, stripped of its power, trembled silently. Yet the gods did not retaliate. They neither raged nor struck back. Even they understood that Irian had not challenged them through war or pride, but reminded them of true purpose. Thus, the eternal flame, once jealously guarded by immortals, now flickered freely. In every village, every city, in the solitude of mountain huts, it lived in the warmth of a shared pot of soup between strangers, in candles set down by grieving hands, in torches lifted by rebels striving for light in the darkest corners, and always the same name whispered through the flames. Irian Dot. Some say when your fire dims without reason, it's his passing. Others believe if you listen closely to the crackling blaze, you'll hear the steady, patient rhythm of hammer strikes upon an anvil, eternal and unwavering. Because Irian never truly died, he became the embodiment of warmth itself. Not a god, not a celebrated hero, but a boy who sacrificed everything so the world could remember how to glow once again. In the land of Sparta, where boys were trained in battle before they could speak, and honor was etched in bone, women were no less formidable. Among these fierce souls was Leonthe, daughter of Commander Adrastus. Her name echoed through marble halls like clashing steel. Born during a blood-red eclipse amid howling omens, midwives whispered she was touched by Irian himself. By 12, Leonthe had bested her brothers in wrestling. By 16, she led a hunting party deep into the Titus Mountains, and triumphantly returned with 3 wild boars trailing her chariot. Leonthe was not only respected, she was profoundly feared. Leonthe strode through the Spartan agora with unwavering posture and silent steps. Men averted their gaze respectfully, while women observed her with a mix of envy and reverence. She spoke little, reserved for moments when spoken to, and when she did, her words struck with the precision of a well-aimed arrow, never wasted or frivolous. Yet beneath her fierce exterior, few perceived the hidden softness within her. At night, when she shed her armor and the torches dimmed, when the bustling world outside faded to silence, Leonthe's gaze lifted to the stars, not in defiance or challenge, but with quiet wonder. Beneath the hardened warrior, something tender and unburned by battle remained. Not a longing for marriage, nor for conquest. Instead, she yearned for something undefinable, beyond Spartan codes, peace, magic, mystery. She never spoke of it, but she knew this. Whenever the full moon rose and the city slowed to a hush, while the warriors lay asleep, her body would pull her toward the cliffs overlooking the river Eurytus. There, she shed her spear, her cuirass, and her formidable reputation, allowing herself to simply be a woman wandering under the vast expanse of stars alone. She believed the world had to be larger than Sparta, greater than swords and pride. It thrummed in her veins like a melody she couldn't hear, yet sensed playing somewhere beyond reach. Then, one night, beneath a sky so silver it looked as if the light had been scraped from the edge of a blade, she saw it, a swan, gliding silently across a still pool within a hidden grove. Unmoving, it watched her, moonlight washing over its back, beautiful in a way no war-hardened thing ever had been. From that moment, Leonthi's life began to drift away from blood and battle, toward something softer, stranger, and far more perilous. The grove itself was secluded and untouched by Spartan feet, nestled between two cliffs, and whispering secrets older than Sparta, older even than Olympus. The trees arched in crescent shapes, their branches low and silvered by gentle moonlight. At its heart lay a shallow lake, still as glass, upon which the swan floated. Its feathers shimmered like woven starlight, neither pure white nor dull gray, but something in between. It moved with the quietness of drifting smoke, cutting across the water without a ripple. Its long neck curved gracefully, as if sculpted by divine hands, and its eyes. Oh, its eyes held no wild animal fear, no panic, only profound awareness. Leonthi froze at the tree line, her training screaming caution. No creature in the wild moved with such calm boldness before a human. Yet this swan did not flee. Instead, it watched her with calm expectation. She stepped forward. The swan tilted its head as if curious. Another step closer. Still, the lake remained undisturbed. She stood at the water's edge, heart steady but alert, her hand resting lightly on the dagger strapped to her thigh. Slowly, deliberately, the swan approached. When it reached the shallows, it stopped and bowed its head slightly. Leonthi knelt down. She had witnessed countless sights in her life: burning war camps, bloodied warriors screaming their agony, newborn calves gasping for breath, but never anything so quiet, so still, so truly enchanted. Tentatively, she reached out her hand. The swan did not resist. Her fingers brushed against feathers that felt like woven starlight. And in that moment, something deep and mysterious opened within her. Something that would forever change the course of her life. Leon's fingertips brushed gently against the swan's feathers. They felt warm, unnaturally warm, as if its body emitted sunlight instead of blood. A stirring arose in her chest. It was neither fear nor fascination, but something far older. Something she hadn't realized she was missing until that very moment. A deep connection. The swan blinked once, then gracefully turned away, gliding back toward the center of the lake. Leonth remained kneeling on the shore, watching it fade into the water, unsure of what had just begun, yet certain it was no mere accident. When the next full moon rose, Leonth returned to the grove. The swan was there too. Month after month, for the next several full moons, they met again. No words were exchanged, no promises made, just presence. A ritual born from silence and undeniable gravity. By the time autumn draped the hills in amber and gold, Leonth no longer questioned why she continued to return. He simply knew the swan would be waiting, and that her world would never be the same again. Seasons turned. Leaves ripened, fell, and grew anew. Far below the hills, wars raged on relentlessly, yet within the quiet moonlit grove, time seemed to pause. Only the full moons mattered now. On those nights alone, Leonth found herself changed. Once, she measured her worth by battle scars, victories, and unquestioned commands. Now, something softer, something far older than even Spartan law, guided her. Each month, she brought offerings: fresh figs, soft linens, delicately carved trinkets from olive wood. Though the swan never ate or acknowledged these gifts, Leonth did not stop. She was drawn by an instinct beyond reason, an unexplainable urge. The swan was always waiting for her. It would meet her at the water's edge, gently dip its head in greeting, then glide alongside her. Sometimes it traced elegant circles around her. Other times it simply stood by her, its warmth seeping into the air as if a hidden sun burned within. Slowly, Leonth began to speak. Not as a hardened soldier, but as a woman finally heard for the first time. She confided in the swan about her father's coldness, her battle's hollow victories, and the restless nights she spent staring at the stars, yearning for something beyond sword and soil. The swan remained silent, yet attentive. Its stillness did not spell absence. It was the purest form of attention, a gift mortals seldom give, one no commander, suitor, or friend had ever offered her. In time, Leonth no longer felt alone. Before each visit, she braided her hair carefully, smoothed her robes, and settled beside the swan for hours. Their shoulders and wings touched lightly. They said little, but she felt more deeply than she ever had in a Spartan palace or battlefield. Remarkably, the swan neither fled nor aged. It remained unchanged. She should have been afraid. Tales whispered of gods who assumed animal forms to ensnare mortals. Stories of ruin and divine punishments for those who dared love too fiercely. But Leonth no longer believed in mere stories. She believed in the perfect way her hand fit the curve of the swan's neck, in its bowed head as she sank softly into the night, and in its unwavering presence as if it waited for her, needed her. No words, no promises. Yet in their silence, something ancient took root. Though she never spoke the word aloud, not even to herself, Leonth felt its truth in her bones. This was love. The swan was not born of earth. Once, his wings had spanned the sky, wide and powerful. His fingers had been the hands that coaxed the sun to rise each day, casting light upon the world. His name, Apollo, had been whispered reverently within magnificent temples, carved eternally into marble, and sung aloud in joyous song. He was the god of light, music, and prophecy. But now, he was silent, feathered, and bound. Long before Leonthi came into this world, Apollo had committed a grave sin in the eyes of Olympus, not with war or defiance through force, but with truth. He dared to speak out against Zeus, challenging the cruel punishments dealt by the king of gods, condemning the harsh silence enforced by power. Instead of killing him, Zeus chose a more terrible punishment. He unmade him. In a spell cast out of fury, harsher than justice itself, Apollo was stripped of his divine form, his voice, his very godhood. His essence was imprisoned inside the body of a swan. This curse was not meant to teach humility, but to remind him that even one who shines as brilliantly as the sun can still be trapped by shadows. Yet, the curse came with a cruel condition. Should any mortal ever discover his true identity, the transformation would become permanent. So, Apollo endured years, centuries, and countless lifetimes, drifting atop lakes, hiding beneath the stars, watching helplessly as mortals forgot his temples and hymns. He beheld the world grow colder as the gods withdrew from the mortal realm. Then came Leonthi. Her presence cracked open something long buried within him, something Olympus itself had forgotten. Hope. He never intended to be seen or linger, but she returned time and again. Her voice, soft in the secluded glade, was the only thing that rekindled the fire inside his soul. She was no priestess, no nymph, no prophesier, chosen by fate. She was a warrior, hands skilled only in weapons, a woman hardened by loss and trained to resist feeling. Yet she saw him, not as a mere symbol or threat, but as something sacred, something truly worth the wait. He dared not speak, dared not reveal his name, but in the tilt of his head and the stillness of his form, he answered every unspoken question she carried in her heart. Slowly, Impossibly, love blossomed between them. In Sparta, solitude was respected, but only for so long. Leonthi's absences did not escape notice. Each full moon, she slipped away from the barracks, the training fields, and the watchful eyes of commanders and comrades. At first, no one questioned her. She was Leonthi, untouchable, unwavering, the warrior whose loyalty was etched into every scar. But Sparta thrived on order and discipline, and love, especially secret love, was foreign to a city built on control. Whispers began to spread. She wanders far away. She speaks less during council. She trains, yet her strikes lack their usual venom. It was true. Leonthi had changed. Her movements remained sharp, but no longer carried cruelty. Her voice had softened, and something tender flickered in her eyes. Some nights, she smiled quietly to herself, as if cradling a secret even the gods could not steal away. Her father noticed first. Commander Adrastos, a man with a stern face weathered by hardship, who expected his daughters to lead men and to suppress folly-like feelings, summoned her one evening under the pretense of discussing strategy. When the chamber had emptied, his voice dropped to a somber tone. "What keeps you from sleep?" he asked. Leonthi remained silent. His voice darkened with warning. "Do not forget who you are." But she had already forgotten. The version of herself shaped by Sparta was slipping away. What Sparta had forged from stone, the swan had touched with water, and Leonthi found herself unwilling to return to her old self. Still, Sparta watched her closely. One patrol even followed her beyond the walls, tracing her steps toward the cliffs, losing her track near the olive groves. She was far too skilled to be shadowed easily, but that was enough to arouse suspicion. Priests whispered about omens, the moonlight carrying voices, the lakes beyond Sparta stirring unnaturally, a warrior woman vanishing each full moon. They feared madness, or worse, divine intervention. Leonthi knew the walls were closing in. Eyes were starting to look where before they looked away. Her silence, once a shield, now left her exposed. Yet still she went. Still she sought him. In that grove where moonlight caught the feathers, she forgot the noise of Sparta, the rules, and the danger. One thing became clear. Above all, she must not be seen, for if the world discovered what her heart knew, it would destroy them both. That night, the moon hung heavy, low, and swollen, golden as a dying flame. Leonthi stood in her chamber, fingers trembling over her armor, unable to fasten the last clasp. Something had shifted beneath the surface. She had felt it for days, a subtle trembling beneath her feet as if the earth itself knew what she did not. The swan had been different during their last meeting. Restless, more watchful, its feathers bristling when the wind shifted. It circled her twice before settling by her side, its warmth sharp rather than calming. Sleep evaded her that night, and when it finally came, it brought visions. She found herself standing in a silver grove, her hands dusted with gold. A statue loomed before her, part man, part swan, wings frozen mid-beat, face serene and lifeless. She reached out, whispering a name she did not realize she knew. Apollo. The statue cracked, and a voice echoed, not from the heavens, but deep within her bones. Truth will freeze what love has kindled. Leonthi awoke breathless, heart pounding, the name still burning on her tongue. She tried to dismiss it as a mere dream, nothing more. But warriors recognize real fear, and this was no ordinary omen. This was prophecy. The following day, Leonthi left Sparta earlier than usual, the ache in her chest deepening with every step. She abandoned her familiar paths, her feet leading her deeper into the hills, through trees unmarked by memory, into untouched groves. There, hidden beneath ivy and moss, she discovered an ancient, cracked altar bearing a single unmistakable inscription carved in faded gold. Apollon. Her breath caught. Suddenly, the pieces fell into place. The swan's warmth, the quiet watchfulness in its gaze, the dreams, the curse buried in her bones, the reason it had always appeared during the full moon, now clear at last. She looked up at the moon, feeling more than just enchantment. She was in the presence of a god. Her god. And she had shattered something sacred. Stumbling backward, she heard the soft flap of feathers behind her. The swan had silently followed, just as before, but now its stillness brought no comfort. Instead, it watched her with a sorrowful tenderness, as if it had already foreseen the painful truth. The end was here. The grove, once quiet, stirred with an ancient breath that rose and fell like a slumbering giant awakening. Moonlight quivered gently on the lake's surface, while the trees leaned closer, silent witnesses to the unraveling of a secret preserved through centuries. Leonthe stood rooted before the altar, the name Apollo ringing in her mind like the sharp clash of a spear against stone. She turned slowly, as if she could reverse what had been uncovered, but it was far too late. The swan stood nearby, not gliding gracefully, but motionless, watching. Its feathers no longer shimmered. Its once radiant glow flickered like a dying flame. Tentatively, Leonthe stepped forward, her lips parted, but no words forming. "I know," she whispered. The wind paused, holding its breath. A single feather drifted softly from the swan's back, descending slowly until it touched the altar, where it vanished into dust. Then, the transformation began. The swan's neck arched not with elegance, but agony. Its entire form trembled, feathers unwound like streams of gold and light, wings twisted into arms, webbed feet split into toes that dug into the earth. Where the swan had stood now knelt a man, naked, radiant, and broken, Apollo himself. His hair shone like the dawn sky, and his skin glowed faintly, like embers beneath polished marble. Yet, his eyes, those eyes were clouded with sorrow and the weight of destiny. Leonthe staggered back, covering her mouth with her hand. Silent love she had harbored now tore through her heart with unbearable ache. He struggled to speak, but the curse had not fully lifted. His voice cracked like thunder echoing through an ageless storm. "You weren't supposed to know," he said at last, his voice barely more than a whisper carried by the wind. It was the only rule. Tears carved lines down Leonthe's battle-hardened face as she fell to her knees beside him. "I didn't mean to," she murmured. For a fleeting moment he smiled, a god's smile not of joy, but of farewell. "I know." Suddenly, the earth beneath them quaked, silently and without notice. A divine decree passed unyielding and merciless. His radiant light dimmed. His skin hardened rapidly. His limbs froze mid-reach. Apollo was turning to stone. Leonthe could only watch as their love transformed into legend. From the moment his name was uttered, the curse initiated its final work. The fluid divinity within Apollo's body slowed and seized. The embers beneath his skin cooled, and his golden hair lost its shine, crystallizing into marble threads as Zeus's punishment reached its peak. There was no hope for mercy or reprieve. Leonthe grasped his hands, still warm, still trembling. She felt the creeping frost of stone weaving over flesh. His fingers closed around hers one last time before stilled forever. The air seemed to hold its breath as she stood there, her heart refusing to accept the cruel ending unfolding before her eyes. She shook her head in disbelief. No, this couldn't be how it ended. Yet, the ancient curse paid no heed to her wishes. It had lain in wait for centuries, silent and unyielding, patient and merciless. Slowly, Apollo's chest rose one final time, and then stilled forever. His magnificent wings, mid-unfurling behind his shoulders, froze, caught forever in a half-folded state. His knees, bent with grief, locked immovably. His face remained strikingly beautiful and kind, yet it was trapped between the opposing forces of love and pain. His eyes stayed open, but vacant, unseeing. Then, a profound silence settled. It was deeper than any battlefield hush, more intense than the brief pause before a warrior's charge. This was no peaceful stillness. It was the silence of loss, of something sacred irrevocably broken. Leonthe dropped to her knees, resting her forehead gently against Apollo's now lifeless hand. A hand that had once held the stars in tender care, now cold and hardened like stone. Her tears traced slow, solemn paths down his marble fingers, each drop falling to the earth with the measured cadence of a funeral march. The grove's light faded, dimmed by the heavy sorrow. Even the moon, usually bright and vigilant, retreated behind a shroud of clouds. No lightning fractured the sky. No deity descended, for the punishment was complete. Zeus had decreed it. The swan had made its final flight, and Apollo, god of light itself, was transformed into a statue of eternal silence, forever frozen in the instant of his last profound truth. Long after the transformation had ended, Leonthe lingered, her arms wrapped around what remained of the god she loved. She uttered no scream, nor did she curse the heavens. There were no Spartans to hear her sorrowful cries, no warriors to bear witness. Only the whispering wind, the ancient trees, and the cold stone figure of a god who had loved her. Not with thunder and flame, but with quiet stillness, and now with unending silence. Leonthe never returned to Sparta. She left behind her armor by the altar. She set aside her sword, and gradually her battle-worn name drifted away like smoke over a tranquil lake. The woman who once stood proudly among kings now knelt in reverence beside a statue that would never move again. The grove became her entire world. Each full moon without fail, she returned, never missing a single one. She brought no offerings, no incense, no prayers, only herself, and the weight of memories carried gently in her heart. She would sit beside Apollo's statue, her fingers brushing the cold stone of the hand she once held in life. Sometimes she spoke softly to it. At other moments, she hummed a song he had never heard, but that somehow felt meant for both of them. Other times, she simply gazed upon the water in companionable silence. The nearby villagers began to whisper rumors, talk of a woman haunting the hills, wandering beneath the moonlight with eyes like distant stars. Some said she had lost her mind. Others claimed she had been chosen by the gods. But none dared approach or disturb her. Years slipped by as winters faded into springs and empires rose and fell. Gods grew silent, but Leonthe remained. She aged, yet never grew weak. Her strength endured, not like that of a soldier wielding sword and shield, but like the deep, unyielding roots of an olive tree clinging steadfastly to the earth through countless storms. And still the statue stood, Apollo captured mid-flight, wings half-formed behind him, his gaze fixed forever on the spot where Leonthe always sat, a moment caught in marble, defying time's passage. Some travelers swore that the stone held warmth beneath their touch, as if placing your hand gently on his chest, you felt something faint, like a heartbeat from a distant dream. Then, under one final full moon, Leonthe arrived. She settled beside him for longer than before, resting her head softly on his shoulder, and she never stirred again. When the villagers came weeks later, they found her there, peaceful, her eyes closed, lips curved in a delicate smile. Nearby, Apollo's statue shimmered with a faint inner light. No one dared to touch it. They made no shrine, no temple. Yet the legend grew. Now, when the moon is full and the wind holds still, some say the swan returns to the lake, not to be seen, but to remember. Melanion was not born under the gilded roofs of palaces, nor amidst the scent of temple incense. His arrival took place beneath a willow tree, amid a storm that cleaved the sky in two. His mother, the daughter of a midwife, wrapped him tightly in linen as thunder crashed over the hills. Birds scattered in flight. Raindrops danced across leaves, yet the child did not cry. From his very first steps, he hummed a melody that seemed to belong to the air itself. Music followed wherever he went. Streams whispered their secrets when he knelt to drink. Leaves quivered in harmony as he passed by. Instruction was needless. Sound was his domain. By the time he was 10, Melanian could mimic the calls of any bird and weave them seamlessly into his songs. By 16, his storytelling was so artful that even the most battle-hardened warriors paused to listen. He sang of rivers, of lost brothers, and of fields untouched by war. Songs that brought tears to men's eyes, tears they had not known resided there. People called him a gift, a miracle, a child blessed by divine breath. Yet he never claimed such honors. Melanian journeyed from village to village, sharing his music freely, without asking for coin or praise. His voice soothed fevers. His strings softened the hardest hearts. Once, he played for a dying child who, upon hearing his lullaby, smiled gently and slipped into death as if entering a dream. But not all who listened were mortal. One spring evening, perched beside a shimmering river as he strummed a tune about starlight, the very air around him changed. The wind stilled, the water hushed, even the frogs ceased their croaks. Then they appeared, the Muses. 9 of them, stepping delicately from the veil between worlds, wrapped in light and sound, each carrying her own essence, history, tragedy, dance, epic poetry, and more. Their eyes held no kindness or cruelty, only profound knowing. They listened closely. To Melanian's astonishment, they sang back, 9 voices in perfect harmony, older than language itself. Closing his eyes, he joined them not by echoing, but by evolving their song. When the last note faded into silence, it felt as if the stars had drawn nearer. One of the Muses, Kali, eldest and the most stern, touched his brow. "You are no ordinary man," she declared. "You are a vessel." Thus began the legend of Melanian, the bard whose voice would shake the heavens. From that night forward, he was no longer just a gifted mortal. He was touched, marked, whispered about. The Muses had chosen him. Deep within the quiet folds of Mount Hell, where few dared to tread, they invited him into their sacred circle. There, beneath the ancient stones, amidst the ancient trees and skies unclouded by mortal ambition, Melanian's learning was unlike any formal teaching. It came through living itself. Kali, the muse of epic tales, showed him how to shape a story into sound. Clio gently whispered the histories of countless nations into his ears as he slept, filling his dreams with the weight of ages. Torpsora, dancing barefoot through fallen leaves, taught him rhythm as he played beside her, his fingers discovering the subtle beat of wind and body. Then there was Ute, who placed her flute softly into his palm and simply said, "Listen." And listen he did, absorbing not only melodies but profound truths, the kind that live between spoken words, the kind that mortals often overlook but deeply feel. He learned to hear the hush before a storm, the ache of yearning, the wonder of a child at the first snowfall. The Muses gifted him not just power, but perspective, an insight into the world's secret emotions. In return, they asked only one thing, for him to sing for mortals, for the lost, the weary, the proud and broken who needed to remember that beauty endured even in suffering. That song could heal as a balm or cut sharp as a blade. At first, Melanian humbly obeyed. He performed in bustling city forums and quiet fields, playing before kings and beggars alike. His songs repaired broken hearts, ignited revolutions, reunited fathers with daughters, and brokered uneasy peace between enemies. Yet as his gift blossomed, so too did a deeper desire, ambition. He began chasing sounds the Muses had never taught, notes untouched by any god. In the stillest, darkest hours of night, he would write alone, drafting fragments of something beyond language itself. It was a final song, he believed, with the power to bend time, still the wind, and reduce stone to tears. Concealing his purpose even from the Muses, this secret part of him no longer wanted to share the divine. He sought to surpass it. Ever watchful, the Muses saw the change, not in his fingers, but in his eyes, which looked beyond them, as if destiny owed him more than mere admiration. And far away, fate shifted quietly. For no mortal walks beside the divine, forever without cost. Melanian withdrew from the world, leaving behind the roar of applause, requests, royal gifts, and the adoration of cities. He ceased performing publicly, stopped teaching, and even fell silent to the muses themselves. Rumors spread. Some said he had fallen ill. Others whispered of death. But the truth was that he journeyed to the shadowed slopes of Mount Helicon, deeper than any mortal dared venture, where only echoes of the old gods stirred. There, in a crystal-lined cave that sang softly when touched by light, he began composing that final song. It came to him in fragments, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in thunder, sometimes in an eerie silence that frightened him. He did not write the song. It revealed itself like a secret hidden within the folds of reality. The melody refused to stay still. It shifted with his breath and twisted with his heartbeat. This was no song meant for performance. It was truth made sound. With its opening note, he heard the birth of stars. In its falling cadence, the death of empires. It carried no sadness nor joy. It simply existed, raw and eternal. He labored over it tirelessly for months, perhaps years, as time warped strangely inside the cave. Food became secondary, sleep fleeting, but his devotion did not waver. Melanian played only when the music itself allowed. At times he would weep deeply, then laugh without warning, as if the melody coursed through his soul rather than just his fingers. And when the final note hung in the air, the very world seemed to transform. Birds halted mid-flight, suspended in stillness. Trees leaned gently toward the windless mountain, as if drawn by some unseen force. Streams ceased their flowing murmurs. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath in reverence. Far above, inside the marble halls of Olympus, the gods turned their heads in quiet awe. Even the fates, who never once looked away from their endless weaving, paused their steady work. The delicate whisper of cloth carried a strange message. A thread trembles. Lysis frowned, and Atropos, the one whose shears never faltered, quietly set them down. They all listened intently. This song demanded nothing. Not worship, not adoration. It did no begging. Instead, it laid bare the entirety of existence, revealing all without pretense. When the last note finally faded, even the cavern itself refused to echo it back. It was as if the world understood that to repeat such beauty would be a sacrilege. The gods waited. The muses waited. They anticipated Melanian's return, expecting him to share this wonder with all creation. But he did not come back with his gift. Instead, he hid it away, concealed its power, and in doing so he set a different music in motion, one full of silence and heavy consequences. When Melanian finally emerged from the cave, the world around him seemed to shrink. The skies that once stretched vast and endless now appeared pale, compared to the lingering echoes of the song that still hummed deep within his bones. People surged forward to greet him, musicians, poets, even priests, each pleading to hear the composition that had moved the heavens. But Melanian stayed silent. When they asked again, he smiled faintly and whispered, "Not yet." Only the muses discerned the shift within him. One evening at dusk, they approached, stepping forth from starlight like breaths escaping a lyre. Their robes shimmered with inspiration, but their eyes were shadowed with a grave warning. "You were chosen to carry beauty," said Arato softly, tinged with sorrow. "But beauty isn't meant to be buried," added Cleo gently. "You must sing it," whispered Calliope with urgency. Melanian bowed his head solemnly. "I will not see it cheapened," he replied firmly. The muses recoiled, struck as if by a harsh blow. "Do you believe mortals unworthy?" Tarpsy asked, voice trembling. "Do you think you alone should guard it?" He met their gaze, not in anger, but with something far colder. Possessiveness. "Yes," he admitted. Between them, silence settled like a harsh winter. "Then you are no longer ours," declared Calliope quietly. "Not because you created something beyond us, but because you hoard it. He said nothing more, and suddenly they vanished. Yet still, the gods waited. Even Zeus, hardly inclined to meddle with mortal affairs, paused his thunderous might to listen. Even Hades in his dark realm tilted his head in curious anticipation. They longed for a single note, a whisper, any fragment of that divine melody. But nothing came. Melanian guarded the song within himself, refusing to write it down, record it, or share it. He called it sacred. But sacred treasures, when locked away too long, begin to decay. He performed other pieces, still beautiful, still able to make audiences weep and crowds cheer. Yet he knew, and so did the divine beings, that something vital was missing. Worse still, something precious had been stolen from the world. The song that could sway the fates, bend the flow of time, and touch even the gods themselves lay buried beneath his pride. He told himself he was protecting it, but the muses, watching from afar, saw the truth clearly. He had bound the divine power to his own fragile ego, and the gods who have endured madness, war, and chaos across eternity could only watch and wait. In a realm where worship demanded unwavering focus and theft was unforgivable, a peculiar stillness swept over one fateful night. The wind ceased its whispering, the stars hushed their luminous chatter, and from the absence of sound and fury, a curse quietly took root. This was no blaze of fire, no roaring thunder or wrath hurled down from Olympus. Instead, it was a curse born not from force but from memory itself, creeping softly as a dream might. Melanian lay beneath the vast open sky, enshrouded in the familiar silence he once cherished. Gently, sleep's tender pull ushered him into the comforting darkness. Waiting there like an old friend or a secret longing was the song, the final song. It returned to him, vivid and unblemished, clearer and deeper than ever before, impossibly perfect. This melody revealed notes he had never penned in waking hours, harmonies yet unimagined unfolding before his mind's eye. It carried him beyond earthly bounds, lifting him across stars, weaving him through endless oceans, unraveling the very fabric of meaning itself. Overcome, he wept. Tears mingled with joy, reverence, total surrender. But then, sorrow came. Not a fading or a weakening, but total erasure. No trace remained. No memory, no single note, no enduring name. The song he had once forged from his very soul, the melody etched deep in his bones, vanished like mist swallowed by the morning sun. At first, Melanian assumed it must be a cruel trick of sleep. Frantically, he clasped his lyre, desperate to summon even one chord progression from the void. He strummed wildly, off-key and frantic, but nothing emerged. That night, heart pounding, he returned early to his bed, and as he drifted again, there it was, the song, radiant and more vibrant than ever before. With tears streaming, fingers dancing through sheets of light, he sang along within the dream itself, memories vivid in that elusive realm. Yet with the dawn, as sun's first breath crept across the horizon, the song slipped away once more. From that moment on, Melanian burned candles late into the night, feverishly scribbling notes in the dark. He begged his mind to cling to a phrase, a rhythm, any single image that would survive the coming day. But, inevitably, the melody dissolved again and again, slipping away like elusive water. Playing music ceased to be a joy. He stopped performing altogether. Crowds thinned, friends drifted away. His home grew cold and neglected, yet none of it mattered. He was consumed by a single obsession, to remember the song. From a distance, the muses watched with heavy hearts. He was gifted, Autarpe murmured, but he chose to imprison his own blessing. Polyhymnia whispered, now only he will hear it, but never grasp its meaning. And Clio's voice, soft and sorrowful, added, it's no vengeance, only balance. Melanian was doomed to hear this perfect song every night for eternity. But it would exist solely in dreams. Each dawn would tear it away again, like water slipping through cracked hands, leaving him chasing an impossible hope. And over time, that hope would corrode into madness. For what more tortures a bard than forgetting the greatest song he ever knew, yet knowing it still sings without him? Melanian stopped marking the days. They merged into an endless cycle of bliss and heartbreak. Each evening, he surrendered himself to dreams where the final song embraced him like a lover returned from war. Each dawn, however, he awoke alone. His cries silent, tears blank and meaningless. He first sought to outmaneuver the curse. He hired scribes to sleep by his side, desperately asking seers to extract fragments from his mind. He sang to mirrors, hoping his own voice might betray a hidden thread of memory. Nothing worked. Gradually, he frayed and withered. He ceased eating. His robes hung loose on a hollowed frame. His hands trembled when he reached for his lyre, once cradled tenderly like a child, and the strings snapped beneath his shaking grasp. Melanian's damaged hands lay still. He never bothered to mend them. They were no longer needed. The music, the endless, elusive melody, came to him in sleep. It became his sole purpose, the only place he felt truly whole. To wake was a punishment. He cursed the morning sun, shattered his windows, and sealed himself away in a darkened room, desperate to cling to the night's gift. Yet with every dawn, a song slipped away, leaving emptiness in its place. When he finally emerged, no trace remained of the bard he once was. He was wild-eyed and gaunt, his once golden voice reduced to a hoarse roar, the product of countless sleepless nights spent humming fragments into the silence. Melanian roamed from village to village, a beggar not for alms, but for memory. Approaching strangers, he would ask, "Have you heard it? The song with no beginning and no end. Have you heard it in your sleep?" At first, people dismissed him with mockery, then grew fearful. Some hurled stones, others fled in terror. In the streets he sang shards of melody, disjointed, frantic bursts that made no sense to anyone but him. These fragments were like pieces of a shattered mirror, clues to something he desperately tried to reconstruct. Each time he almost grasped the whole, it slipped away again. He laughed in frustration, then wept, then laughed once more. Every night, the song returned, radiant, complete, tantalizingly out of reach. The muses watched silently, not in anger but in sorrow. Once, he was their masterpiece, the finest vessel for divine inspiration. Now, he was a cracked jar, overflowing only when no one watched. In his downward spiral, the very song he had fought so hard to keep became his undoing. Not with fury, not with fire, but with silence. Melanian no longer truly lived in the world. His body moved through it, but his mind drifted endlessly between dreams and daylight, caught somewhere between past and present. A haunting melody played in his ears alone, arriving too late to grasp. He wandered barefoot through cities that once hailed him like royalty. Children who once nestled at his feet, now scattered from his shadow. His name, once sung in admiration, became a whispered warning. Don't end up like Melanian. He slept wherever he could, beneath trees, inside empty chapels, in the doorways of inns where keepers once begged for his presence. He no longer sought food, only a place to rest and the fragile hope of dream song. The curse was unyielding. Each night he succumbed to restless sleep with trembling anticipation. Then, as if by cruel design, the final song returned, whole, vibrant, a perfect ghost. And each morning, his mind emptied it away. The true torment wasn't the silence but the memory of sound. He remembered hearing something transcendent, something that had meant everything, yet the meaning slipped beyond reach. Desperate, he spoke to shadows, to trees, to stars. Sometimes he sang to strangers, demanding they sing back, convinced the melody lurked in another's throat. Once, sure a child had hummed it. He followed the family across 2 villages, collapsing in dust with tears, begging the boy to sing it again. But the sound was ordinary, empty. He wept for hours. Still, each night the song returned, taunting, embracing, divine. He tried to hum it awake, to wake mid-melody, but the curse was cunning. He could neither move within the dream nor capture it in writing, forever trapped in a haunting loop between silence and sound. Melanian could only carry the music within him, never fully grasp it aloud, even as he slept. Some said a faint humming escaped his lips. Those who dared to press an ear near his mouth at midnight swore they heard a melody unlike any other, but only then, in the shadows and silence of night. Yet the muses had abandoned him. The gods ceased their watchful gaze. Once the vibrant voice carrying the world's stories, Melanian became a wandering shadow, a fading echo of a song the world could no longer recall, but that he could not forget. Over time, Melanian grew thin as the twilight. His skin, once glowing with golden light, turned pale and fragile as parchment. The remnants of his voice came out hoarse, stripped raw by years of whispered secrets and endless wandering. He no longer sought food, shelter, or even the elusive song that had once filled him with purpose. He simply walked, driven by a silent force. One evening, Melanian reached a cliff overlooking the sea. Here, there were no bustling towns, no winding roads, no curious eyes watching him. Only the wind, the restless waves, and a sky studded with stars slowly awakening in the deep blue night. He curled up against a rugged stone, the salty sea breeze tangling the last strands of his hair. He did not cry. He did not sing. He simply closed his eyes. And then the dream returned. But this time, it was different. There was no waiting, no mist to push through, no struggle to catch the music. The final song was there immediately, complete and unmistakable. It was more than sound. It was a place, a presence, an entire world molded from music itself. Melanian stood barefoot on chords that bent like grass beneath his feet. Above him, stars pulsed in perfect rhythm. The sky was a living symphony. The wind's melody blended in harmony. And he was not just a listener. He was part of this glorious composition. His own voice joined the song, steady and true, no longer trembling or forgotten. It soared. In that transcendent moment, he saw every note he had lost, every phrase he had mourned. But now he understood. The song had never truly left him. It had grown beyond his grasp, becoming something far greater. He was not its master. He was its witness. Within that final dream, sorrow, shame, and punishment vanished, replaced only by serene release. When the sun rose, Melanian did not move. The gentle breeze whispered around his still form, as if carrying away his final breath. A shepherd wandering near the cliff soon found him, peaceful, with hands resting lightly on his chest as though cradling an unseen song. There was no scroll, no recording left behind. Yet high in the coastal sky, seabirds traced unusual formations, seeming to dance to a melody only they could perceive. And for a brief moment, the sea sang, not in words nor simple melody, but in something older, more profound, the very essence Melanian had finally become. He was laid to rest beneath a solitary olive tree near where he last breathed. No priest chanted rites, no crowds gathered. Only the shepherd who found him and a few villagers who remembered the tales, faint echoes of the bard who once made even gods pause mid-breath. There was no monument, only silence, but silence in its own way amplifies truth. In the years that followed, strange whispers traveled across the land. Travelers spoke of passing that cliff under a new moon and hearing fleeting melodies carried by the wind. Brief, delicate, heartbreakingly beautiful, like a final whisper from a world Melanian could no longer hold. Yet, would never quite leave behind. It was never a full song, just a single note, delicate and haunting enough to make anyone stop in their tracks. Children started dreaming of melodies they had never heard, while musicians found themselves waking in the depth of night, tears silently tracing down their cheeks, unable to recall why. On rare quiet evenings, when a bard sat alone at dusk with no one to listen, a sudden chord would emerge beneath their fingers. Something alien, something flawless, yet not their own. They never held on to it. No sorrow lingered. The artists remained silent. They did not blame another bard. They did not attempt to reclaim the song. Instead, they understood the transformation of Millennium. No longer a mere figure, neither a cautionary tale nor a hero, but a vessel elevated to legend. A soul punished, not through cruelty, but because of refusal. A soul redeemed not through sharing, but through surrender. The final song was never inscribed in scrolls or performed in grand amphitheaters or sacred temples. It does not dwell in scripture or notation. Instead, it lives in that fragile space between sleep and waking, in the quiet moments before a performer strums their first chord, in the way the ocean's roar changes when you're drenched in grief. Milanian's melody became woven into the very fabric of the world, not to be memorized but to be deeply felt. A whisper beneath the bones, a wordless tune. And those who catch even a fleeting glimpse of it never forget the profound silence that follows. It is said that if you stand alone, on the perfect cliff, on the perfect night, unseen by anyone, with a gentle wind caressing you, you might hear a sound that does not belong to this world. Just a fragment. Just a breath. And perhaps, if you listen deeply enough, you will finally understand why Millennium could never let it fade away.